Hey entrepreneurs, today we have Jeremy Pope with us. He is a self-studied clinical hypnotist and he's self-studied in psychology. His business is for the benefit of both sales reps and business owners. His primary client is a business owner who's not experienced at hiring or managing sales reps and specifically avoiding some of the abuses of sales reps that we talk about in this episode. Here you're going to hear a whole myriad of opportunities to pull some nuggets from him, everything from talking about what is $1 million ear to understanding the internal world of others in your client. He has a quote that he expands a touch on. It's no magic words, only magic feelings. He's trained in neuro-linguistic programming and just has so much skill to bring to what he does. Here's the episode with Jeremy Pope.
Jeremy, thanks for joining us on the Entrepreneurs United podcast. Can't wait to learn a little bit more about yourself, your background as an entrepreneur, and also how you're helping entrepreneurs. So without further ado, can you tell us a little bit about what your company does today, and then we'll rewind back to your past?
Yeah, thank you for having me here today. My company is Call Overhaul, and we help entrepreneurs who are hiring their first salespeople or maybe their third salesperson. Building a team for the first time is really where a lot of our focus goes. So we find that a lot of salespeople and sales development reps get accidentally abused by business owners who have not yet learned how to lead a sales team. And they've not yet learned what resources a sales team needs and what systems have to be in place and the culture that's healthy around that. And so we help them develop the culture and the systems and the processes so that a salesperson can come in, onboard quickly, start making money quickly, and really just kick ass fast. So that's a big part of our focus. But we also help solopreneurs who are just needing to sell better.
Love it. And you hit my heart right off the bat. One of my favorite sayings is I just love to kick ass. So if you can help entrepreneurs kick ass, I'm in. Let's talk a little bit more about how that came to be. And then we'll dive more specifically into how entrepreneurs can do better with either existing sales teams and or if they want to build a sales team for the first time, what are some things they should be considering? Take us back through your history. What made you the expert in this area through your learnings?
I've learned from so many great sales trainers who are way better than I am. I get a lot into the sales operations side of things as well as the sales training. And so that combination is something I don't see a lot of people doing. But I come at this from being a clinical hypnotist for 10 years. That's where I learned how to listen properly. And that's really what taught me how to sell. Learning to hear people's internal metaphors. If somebody says, I'm stuck, well, they're building a scene inside their head. They might be glued to something. They might be behind a roadblock. They might be in a hole and need a ladder or a rope. There's a lot of different kinds of stuck. And when you treat their internal world like it's a physical thing and you build that scene in your own head and you do your best to join them in that, you remove a lot of the mental energy required just to translate between each other, and you let them put the energy into making the decision itself. You let them put that energy into action rather than analysis. And so it becomes a very collaborative way of selling, and it removes a lot of the adversarial nature, or it removes a lot of the need for pressure that many salespeople feel. So we talk about moving from adversarial selling to collaborative selling. Instead of facing off against each other, you're both pulling in the same direction against the problem. So you're getting somewhere together.
So, Rich, I have to believe this is the first time that I recall having a clinical hypnotist on our podcast. Do you recall ever having anybody with even close to that background?
Not that they claimed. We may have, but we didn't know.
It's a little embarrassing. It is. Yes, there's that.
Jeremy, what's the schooling like to be a clinical hypnotist? What does that look like?
Why do you think there's any schooling to be a clinical hypnotist? Why? Is it a position of responsibility or something? No, there's almost none required. I mean, you can go get
Okay.
you can get weekend certifications from all kinds of places. Um, I have found that it's very easy to teach someone to hypnotize others. I can teach that in an hour flat. But learning to be a good enough psychologist to help the changes stick in someone's ecosystem, that's the hard part. And it takes years. Apprenticeship is really, that's the way that psychologists learn a lot of what they do. It's once they get into the field after they're done with school. And so, um, yeah, if someone happens to be going that direction, please apprentice with someone.
I think you are incredibly humble, because I think one of the best ways that in our conversations with business owners, one of the best ways to innovate something is to scratch your own itch. That if you have a need for something and you can scratch that itch, there is an assumption that, well, a bunch of other people probably have a similar need. And it sounds like you had a need for enhancing your memory and you went to go self study to figure out how you can do that. You came across hypnosis as an option to do it. You scratched your own itch and you went, there's probably a market for other people that can use this. So, although you don't have any, degrees per se, you have a ton of experience and a ton of self study, it sounds like, in psychology and hypnotism. Can you talk to us about your self education process? What did that look like to come to have the expertise you do in the absence of a school setting?
First, I'd just like to agree with you that I am incredibly humble. Yes. um, most of my learning comes from doing. I have very little patience for sitting and like even now I've probably got 200 hours worth of video courses that I have bought and paid for and that are waiting for me to sit down and study them, and there's very little chance that's going to happen. So I get one of my team members to do it with me, and we go through as a group study sort of thing so we can talk about it. So I've learned that the classroom environment just, that's not going to happen for me. I'm 41 at this point, and I'm going to do what I want to do at this point. I'm no longer going to try and fit into too many molds. So most of it comes from, okay, let's experiment and then let's tweak. Let's see what didn't work. Let's do it for free for a while and see what happens. And then if it works, great. Let's do it a couple more times and then start charging. If it doesn't work, let's go back to the drawing board. But it's very experiential. And everybody learns hands-on, so I'm not alone in that respect. I mean, I don't think there's as much of a dichotomy between, well, I'm an auditory learner, or I'm a visual learner, or I'm a hands-on learner, or things like that, as some people like to go after. I think everybody needs all three of those. But the patience, I never matured past a certain impatience level, and so I just learned, okay, get into it as fast as possible so that I don't get bored. My journey around sales and hypnosis, so there were two different ones, and they happened simultaneously. The sales journey and the skills journey there. I had never done consultative selling before, like marketing in a couple of steps and then selling in a couple of steps. And I was very resistant to doing a free consult. I had been used to, I remember this was in 2005. I had been used to, um, you run a newspaper ad, or you run a radio ad, or you go on the radio. Hypnosis is almost like cheating for publicity. It's very easy to get PR around hypnosis. It's kind of a fascinating and taboo topic all at the same time. And so I really leaned into the PR stuff for that. And so go on the radio or get a radio ad or get a newspaper ad. They call up, you sell them on the phone, they come in after having paid, and you do your sessions and help them stop smoking or lose weight or get rid of chronic pain or get rid of asthma, allergies, or deal with a phobia. Those are my big five, the bread and butter right there. And so when my mentor, Scott McFall, came along in 2005, I was training about 100 hypnotists in sales and some marketing and PR and hypnosis techniques and stuff like that. And I encountered him, and he wanted me to move to a free consult. Okay, run the full page newspaper ad with testimonials. You could do that back then, and then they come into the office, and you meet with them for free. That hits me right in the hourly rate. I mean, what are we doing here, folks? So it really taught me a lot about, he taught me almost more than anybody but my parents about growing up, just maturity as a person. And so I'm ever grateful to him. And so the free consult method was where I learned to sit and listen. And that's now what I call the $1 million ear. Kind of what I mentioned a little bit ago about joining somebody in their world. What is the scene that they're building, and treating it as if it's a literal thing that's happening around you. Like their internal world is real. Just pretend it's real. And people tell you all kinds of things. They say, I'm stuck. Well, I'm not stuck, but you know what I mean? I'm like, I know exactly what you mean. You're stuck. It happens to be inside your head instead of external, but you're stuck. Like, believe them. Just believe them. That's all you have to do once you hear it. And you'll get immense traction on all kinds of the emotional things required for selling. And so when you treat sales like a giant listening exercise, it lets you focus on buy-in. It lets you focus on what are they committing to, rather than what did I cover in my script, or what do I want them to believe? What do I have to keep on talking until I see that they believe it? No, it's what questions do I ask to get them to commit to something verbally, so that I can hear and see and experience that they are committed to this idea that they need the thing. I say there are no magic words, only magic feelings. And if there's anybody that should believe in magic words, it's a hypnotist with NLP training, the Tony Robbins style of hypnosis and all that stuff. Like those people believe in magic words so hardcore, and I just don't anymore. I just really don't.
Well, it certainly sounds like Scott McFall made a big difference in your world, and I picked up on a few nuggets in the story that you had just told. I love the idea of the $1 million ear, and someone's internal world is real. I can already sense that people who communicate with you can be at peace with what they're communicating to you, because you're not going to challenge the fact that what they're saying is real in their world, but you are going to help them navigate beyond some of the obstacles that are real in the world. But they are very real to them. And I can imagine being a client of yours and being able to say anything and not feel like the rest of the world sometimes just doesn't listen very well. And you've made a living off of the mentorship you got from Scott, being $1 million ear.
You are very good at picking up on what people value about themselves. I like that a lot. Yes, I agree. That is very important to me, and that is one of the things that I'm most proud of when people say that they've been able to tell me things that they can't tell other people, or they've been able to go much further because of being understood more deeply. That's a very big deal to me. So yeah, that's a big part of that story. Yeah.
A quick follow-up question on that is, often what John and I have found with many guests on the podcast, and we're now over 100 here, is that people's passion in their work sometimes come from compensating for something that they didn't have typically when they were younger. So if I draw a quick line there, we don't need to go too deep down it, but it was a thought that I had that I wanted to ask you is, I would imagine that you may not have had $1 million ear when you were growing up. And you may not have had many people that believed in you and your reality and the story that you were telling. And my guess is that part of your passion involved in that is to give that to people in a way that it wasn't given to you. Does any of that connect?
Some of it, yeah. I'll have to think about some of the other stuff. Not having $1 million ear growing up, absolutely not. I was a bossy little ass, and I just did. I didn't care about people. I was very task oriented, very goal oriented, um, hyper competitive, type A with all the ways the stresses come out. But I remember it was 2001 when I decided to become interested in people. Sort of a, I feel kind of like a sociopath. I'm gonna fix that. And so there's a very distinct thing, and it was around that time. I remember the apartment I lived in when I made that decision, and it was kind of a gift. It was not a difficult thing. It was like right place, right time, right message from God, sort of thing. Like, okay, it's time for this now. And so that was a blessedly simple shift to make. I'm not sure why that was easy the way it was, but it was a very clear decision to become interested in people, to become curious about people.
And that was at 20 years old. If that was 2001, that was when you were 20?
Yeah.
How did that shift come about?
I don't remember that.
Wow.
I just remember the moment. The moment itself stands out in the color of the carpet, but I don't really remember why I felt that was necessary. Again, it felt like more like a message from God, like, okay, here's what to focus on, sort of thing, than something that grew slowly and organically.
Yeah, you had a calling.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's definitely enabled everything everything high leverage since then has been based on that in some way or another. So I'm very grateful for that moment, for that message. As far as not being listened to or not being believed in, I don't remember dramatic examples about that. Uh, it is possible, but I do. I am much closer to my parents now than I was then. So, I mean, that's been a steady improvement, and they were wonderful parents. And I'm 41 now, and I look at, I mean, Mom was 21 when she had me, and I'm like, how did this come out okay? Like, me at 21 having a kid, that would have been just disaster all over the place. I still hardly feel ready for it, even though the clock is ticking, you know? And so I'm just shocked that we get along well, that they did such a great job. And by most any measure, they were great parents. So I can't really point to any specific external thing. It feels a lot of my story, what I tell myself, is a delayed maturity story. Like, I was smart enough to, Scott called it, slip the gauntlet. I didn't have to run the gauntlet that some other people did. I could kind of cheat my way around a lot of lessons that other people had to learn, and I was willing to put energy into winning weird contests that, like, a 7-year-old has all their energy they can put into winning against the parents, and the parents have a lot of other stuff to do plus the other kids. And so there was a lot of those kinds of things that at age 27 I was still learning discipline lessons and maturity lessons that, I mean, most people should learn at 7 or 8 years old. So
And I feel like you answered the question, because it was really about how you came to have the calling and passion you do for being the $1 million ear for others. And it wasn't as much from growing up and having an absence of people believing in you. It was this moment in 2021 where your calling came from, and it just became abundantly clear to you that that was where you needed to go next. So, yeah, I appreciate you reflecting on that with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for thank you for asking that question. It's not something I often do.
So, Jeremy, I have a very serious question.
All right.
Technically, from a hypnotist perspective, never been hypnotized ever that I know of.
John, you already are. Like what Jeremy was doing earlier.
That's where I'm going. Rich, don't steal my question.
Oh, sorry.
My question was, I don't know that I've ever been hypnotized, but am I being hypnotized right now? That was going to be my question. And not from a malicious standpoint, just from the conversation we've been having over the last 20 minutes.
If you ask 100 different hypnotists what is hypnosis, you will get at least 100 different answers, and several I don't knows. I am of the opinion that there's no such thing as not hypnosis. There's a great book called Monsters and Magical Sticks. There's No Such Thing as Hypnosis by Stephen Heller and Terry Steele. And he died a few years back, but it's still one of the best books on the conversational hypnosis and the nature of, like, what is it? I am one of the hypnotists that does not believe that trance equals hypnosis. And coming from the NLP tradition of hypnosis, there's the concept that you're never not in trance. It's all just different trances for different purposes.
Yep.
Like you have a podcasting trance, you have a dealing with driving trance, you have a workout trance, you have a hanging out with the kids trance. You know, all these things are just different states of mind. And there's really no reasonable way to exclude one of those states of mind from the word trance. I believe that hypnosis is learning.
Yep.
Not data memorization, but like skills learning.
Yep.
And the way I always used to tell clients, when you're learning to ride a bike, it takes a few tries, maybe a lot of tries. And we have those little hypnotic moments where one more piece kind of clicks into place.
Yep.
And that learning moment is hypnosis. Yep. And so hypnosis is learning, and learning is hypnosis, and never the twain shall part. And all that a hypnotist, quote unquote, does is we take that moment and we stretch it out to 15, 20, 30 minutes long, and we can just dump in new learning at a hugely accelerated pace instead of having 8 seconds of that flash, like, oh, I got a little more balance on the bike now. We can just dump in so many things all at once. And so I used to call it the great accelerator, because it makes learning and skills learning in particular so much faster, 10 times, 100 times faster. And that, I believe, is a big part of why it makes it so useful for habit changes and for identity resolution sort of things.
Awesome. All right.
Again,
so
that's a big answer there. But
no, it's great. I appreciate it. And you know, certainly a good segue to, you know, people are listening to this podcast, just learned a lot about hypnotism, and certainly would love to maybe get a referral from you on somebody from that industry who maybe educate us even further on that. But let's move to now the sales side of it, because that's where you're spending a lot of your time now, helping entrepreneurs with their sales teams. And, you know, I have to go straight here right off the bat. And if you can, bullet point format it for me so that we can kind of probe in where necessary. But what are the top 5 mistakes that entrepreneurs make with their sales teams? And I know you probably don't have a canned 5 ready.
Right,
so just pop out in your mind what you think the top ones are that entrepreneurs make mistakes with their sales team.
A lot of this, they assume that the systems are too dry to matter.
Okay.
And a lot of the language around systems, processes, documentation, KPIs, scorecards, I mean, just saying those words out loud, it feels very dry to a lot of people.
Yes.
And
Okay.
I made that mistake as well. I mean, sales, especially if the founder is a good salesperson themselves, or if they've had to become a decent or good salesperson, the thrill of making the sale, that cocaine high of, you can feel the tipping point in the sales call when they've bought.
Okay.
And a good salesperson gets that. And so when you're doing it all yourself, I say founders make dirty deals, or founder fuel runs dirty. We can burn almost any kind of fuel. We can be the big ship that's burning bunker fuel, but boy, it makes for a lot of pollution. It makes for weird deals. And you guys, with your aggregation structures and your roll-up structure, like focusing on the structure of the businesses themselves as you do, you've seen a lot of messy guts of businesses. And this is a big part of what I'm talking about there. So founders sell weird stuff. They make up things on the fly a lot of times, especially if they're in the disc profile, they're high DI. They tend to think on their feet and like, okay, what's any deal that I could make if they're not into that particular deal that I have written down on the page? Salespeople don't have the authority to do that.
Correct.
And so salespeople sell clean, but it reduces the close rate pretty significantly from the founder a lot of times. And so founders have to take that into account. Like, this is a different journey that we're starting now. I really like working with founders that have failed a couple of times to hire salespeople, because they're like, okay, I'm willing to get it at this point, that there's something fundamental I'm missing here, and I'm willing to be coachable around this thing. So systems, KPIs, all the dry stuff, the processes, having those in place properly to support a salesperson, so that the salesperson doesn't have to have the authority to make up a dirty deal, because they're not gonna. I mean,
I'm sure you hear a lot. I don't understand why salespeople don't sell as well as I did. I used to sell at 50%. They're only selling at 20%. I don't understand. All right, got it. So the entrepreneur, assuming systems are too dry to matter, what would be bullets 2, 3, 4, and 5?
A lot of them are going to have to do with proper support. When it comes to the first-time team builders, it's going to come to proper support. There's a lot of confusion over. Most people are familiar with Jim Collins' wrong seat on the bus, right person on the bus in the first place kind of thing. But those two different concepts, do we have the right person and are they in the right seat? There's often a lot of confusion when you don't have the right training and support, like coaching systems. Pat Lencioni talks about in his book, The Secrets of Employee Engagement, The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. He talks about these 3 concepts, and I always mix up what he calls them, but immatterability, anonymity, and immeasurability. So can this employee feel viscerally how their work matters to their coworkers, their boss, their clients, to the people they're in contact with regularly, not just some abstract I matter in the world kind of thing, but who are the people I matter to and how do I matter? And then, can I measure that I'm doing a good job aside from how my boss happens to feel because it's Tuesday and he always has to pick up his kids late on Tuesday or something like that? And then the anonymity, do I feel known as a person, not just as a cog in the machine? I talk a lot about, in the leadership stuff I do, I talk a lot about mad respect. So micromanagement, abdication, and delegation, MAD. And a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs, as they're learning, they swing back and forth and just peg the needle on micromanagement to abdication to micromanagement. And it takes a while to find the balance of what is true delegation like. And Christopher Jones talks about the 4 or the 5 phases of delegation: the do as I say, research and report, research and recommend, act and report, act and don't report, just hit your number and I'm happy with you. That's more like a department manager kind of thing. But moving your people through those phases of delegation on the certain topic that you've got, like, they're not an expert on everything. Be willing to move them through up to the appropriate level of delegation for this particular topic. And you can trust not just their intentions, but you can trust their skills and you can trust their judgment. Those trusting somebody's judgment is the hardest level of trust by a long shot in my mind.
Yeah, I think that was helpful. When you had your original introduction, you used the words that sales reps can get abused by business owners.
And vice versa.
Abused is a bit of a hot word. When you say they can be abused by business owners, I'm assuming you're using that word purposefully. Can you tell us about what are the abuses that salespeople receive from inexperienced business owners?
Yeah. Role mismanagement is one of the biggest things that I see. I talk a lot about accidental toxicity, accidental abuse, consent and sales rape is one of the pieces that I put out a while back that was fun. And so I intentionally use some very strong language about this stuff because I do believe it's that big of a deal. I am never going to really get through to the people who are happy being takers. That is not my audience. My audience are the givers who feel stuck in a taker process because they just don't know any better. I talk a lot about that. And so my goal is to build a community of givers who know where to go to get good, solid giver style advice that lets them do better in their own role than they ever could have trying to follow a taker process. So that's the perspective I'm coming from on that. But the role mismanagement specifically, I see this a lot around sales development reps or appointment setters. A lot of very small business owners call them, or in certain, like the micro agency world, a lot of people call them appointment setters. So, all right, go set appointments. You're hired. It's like, what is this? You're not ready for an appointment setter until you have your marketing working. This is not a marketing job. This is a sales job. And yeah, it's kind of at the intersection of marketing and sales. The prospecting covers some elements of marketing and sales, yes. But like, if you want someone to go make their own lead list from Yelp or things like that, I mean, I go build a lead list using D7 scraper software, things like that, and then start calling. I mean, it's the classic smile and dial, here's the phone book sort of thing. And that is not a sales rep's job in a good, well-developed role. That's one type of way that I see roles mismanaged. Another type is the compensation structures. Do you have a realistic comp structure? Anybody can say, come make $200,000 a year on commission and build this bizarrely unrealistic, well, if you make 32 sales a day, then you'll make $200,000 a year. I call BS all day long, and it comes from a fear on the entrepreneur's part. So much of this stuff goes back to mindset, and so we end up having to lean into, like, what's the hardest thing in your business? This is why I'm not just a sales coach, I'm a business coach, because you have to follow it where it goes. And almost always, the hardest thing in your business is the biggest fear and the biggest thing that you haven't admitted to yourself about something. So a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs in particular, who have not yet proven out the model, and I've been there 100%. I've done this myself. I have abused salespeople before, and accidentally, yes, but still, it still counts, you know? And so they're afraid that the model won't work, and so they don't dig in deep enough to prove that model beforehand. They're hiring someone at cut rate prices to come in and be an expert. I see this more with appointment setters and salespeople. I'm like, you're asking them to do VP sales kind of work, like chief revenue officer type of work. That's not what they're here for. You're hiring them on commission to do appointment setting, and you're expecting them to develop a system? Come on. This is flatly unrealistic.
If you look back at your schedule at a couple of the clients who you did coaching or consulting with, one of the reasons that they employ you as a coach or a consultant is because you either provide a space for them to uncover nuggets of wisdom, or you provide the nuggets. Can you tell us about the most impactful conversation that you had this week with a client, and what was uncovered that, on a bet, one of our listeners out there could benefit from too?
Yeah. One of the things that I tend to try and make a lot of things very systematic. In my sales call overhaul process, I talk about the 7 levels or the 7 layers of the sales call overhaul. And so a lot of times in sales consulting, so there was a client that I was dealing with this week that he had 2 of the dimensions, very low scores in a sales call he sent in on 2 of these dimensions. And it was, we got the lights turning on when I got through about, when you are selling, it is not about you saying something until they let you say it without disagreement. It is about you asking the questions that get them to commit. I think I even mentioned this earlier in our interview today. The discovery process is the sales process, the way that I do it. And that's not the way for everybody. There are a lot of different sales processes out there, but I use questions to make my sales. I considered calling it objection-free selling it at one point, because 90% of my sales are made without objections, because I talk about them first. I use what I call the elephant in the room technique. And so the lights came on for this client when I finally got across the idea that discovery is not for you. It's not for you to achieve more data in your database. It's for them to have the realization. It's for them to say it out loud and feel that they're committing to it, and build that commitment and the consistency principle from Cialdini, the influence book. Like, they say it out loud, and they're building an internal tension, not pressure. That comes from you, and you don't have to do that. But they're building that tension inside themselves between their values and their goals, their vision, and where they feel they are right now. And the distance between those two, the gap stuff, like Keenan talks about with gap selling. He's got a pretty good concept around that stuff. And so when we got across the idea that discovery is for them, not for you, that was when I saw the lights come on, and that was a very fun moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that being absolutely powerful. I think it's something, even as a coach and a consultant, we can remind ourselves of also sometimes. Sometimes we get so far down the road of asking questions so we can understand that we actually step outside of the lane of the person who's supposed to be getting the value in the conversation, understanding.
Yeah. It just being high I and just curious about everything for curiosity's sake.
Yeah.
Is not what coaching is. There's a very big difference between the selfish curiosity and curiosity with a goal, with a coaching goal. And staying on task as a coach that's one of the hardest things for me. Like, reframing back to the fundamentals as frequently as possible. I have to remind myself of that really frequently.
Mm-hmm. Well, in closing here, this has been a great conversation, and would love to get just a last nugget of knowledge from you on, if you're able to impart one thing that is simple and memorable for every one of our entrepreneurs who are listening right now, as it relates to acquiring or working with salespeople. What is the one memorable thing that all entrepreneurs should walk away from this episode with and do something with?
If you don't believe in your existing process, you are not ready for a salesperson. You must believe in your existing process. Even if you don't believe in yourself that much, you still have to believe in the process. And that can be built. You can have a process that you come to believe in, but it is highly likely that you will accidentally abuse a salesperson if you hire before, if you're giving them too much responsibility. If you're giving them the responsibility of figuring things out, that is not their job. Don't pretend it's their job. That is a salaried position or an equity position to figure things out. A commission position is to run an existing system. You can hire consultants and you can figure things out. You can spend extra time on it, on the business, not in the business. It's all the classic answers. There's no easy answer to this, but it must be dealt with to be successful with a sales team.
Yeah, don't hire a salesperson to create the system and solve your problems. Hire a salesperson when you have a successful system that just needs to be run faster. I think that's a great nugget of wisdom. Thanks so much, Jeremy. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Likewise. Thank you.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode.
John, quick question for you.
Yeah.
Ballpark for me. How many salespeople have you led? Not necessarily you've hired, but you become responsible for leading. Like, what's the ballpark on how many? 100 plus over your lifetime?
Yeah, I'm going to say 400.
400. And he talked about mistakes that business owners make. And he even referred to them as, abuse of sales reps. He gave us a couple examples of abuse. The role mismanagement, so you're putting him in kind of the wrong seat, and the compensation structure may be off and kind of overpromised. Are there other things you've done that would classify as, boy, that was kind of a mistake with salespeople, in addition to the ones that he gave, or could you relate with the ones that he gave?
Yeah, unfortunately, I could relate to all of them, and have done all of them. And it's certainly hard to hear that what he's trying to do is protect against entrepreneurs who abuse salespeople, because I've been there. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but as an entrepreneur, you're trying to grow a business. The first thing you need is business. And one thing that he said that I thought was very, very wise is a lot of founders make dirty deals. And what he means by that is, as a founder, you can go into a customer and reduce your pricing, offer more than what you typically could. You can do a lot of different things because you're the founder. You can make the decisions. But then you hire sales reps and you send them in there and they have guardrails and they can't go outside of this process and they have to stay within this pricing range. And then they don't get the same success ratio that you have and you're wondering why they can't do it. So absolutely, Rich. I've in addition to all of these, though, for me, the hiring is a big mistake. A lot of times entrepreneurs will take anybody with a pulse that will take their compensation plan that looks like they can sell and throws them into it, not really thinking through the proper interview process to get to the right salesperson. So it's more of a, well, if they don't succeed, I'm just going to fire them anyway approach. So that's a real bad process that I failed at several times. It was like, hey, we need salespeople quick, let's go. The other one that he talked about a little bit, but I think it needs to be reinforced more, is the coaching side. If I go back 25 years to when you and I were training salespeople, right? We would go out, demonstrate. We would then, break it down together with the sales rep. Then we would go watch them, come back, give them some notes again. We'd probably repeat that process 2, 3, 4, half a dozen times, a dozen times, until we felt the sales rep was able to accomplish the model sales, process. I'd say like 5% of entrepreneurs do that today. I think they bring somebody in, they put them in a seat and they say, here's the manual, figure it out, I'll give you half a day of training, go, and then wonder why they don't succeed. So that's a problem that I've seen that we didn't talk a lot about in this episode, just the coaching of sales reps to help them. He said something, try and get them to get success early and often. Well, the only way you do that is by going out with them and helping them and coaching them, or having a VP of sales or someone at a higher level who really invests in the first 3 months.
A couple thoughts to throw back at you. You talked about the selection of salespeople. not recently, but I know you and I have talked about that, how people interview and approach a selection process is often what you'll get in them, an employee, after you hire them. So, in this case, in talking about the $1 million ear with Jeremy, that was something that really resonated for me. And someone's internal world is real for them, and believe in it. And he talked about this consultative sales process on asking questions for the benefit of the person who is the potential buyer in it. Yep. I frame all that up to say, hey, if you're going to select a salesperson and you have a consultative sales process where you're looking for someone to be a good listener, what better place to look to see if they're a good listener than an interview? So when it comes time in an interview for it to be turned around and say, so what questions do you have for me? And maybe you'll start with that in an interview process or end, but at some point you go, what questions do you have for me?
Yep.
How well does a person listen? How many follow-up questions they have that would demonstrate they actually heard the answer? So I just immediately think of that. When you talk about selection process, I think of remembering that people interview in the way that they're going to behave after you hire them. On the coaching side, I could not agree with you more. And one of the things in coaching that is a fundamental decision of the coach is when you're with your sales rep on this particular appointment, are you going to demonstrate or are you going to observe? In other words, are you going to demonstrate to the sales rep, this is how it's done? Or are you going to be quiet and watch what happens in the absence of you participating and give them feedback outside of the appointment on how they can improve it? What I find is, in the absence of somebody actually selecting demonstrate or observe, they get over involved in the sales process, chase the sale too much. It always becomes demonstration of the ability of the person who's the most tenured or the entrepreneur, and it's not actually a learning event.
Yep, that's very well said. And that's a common language, right? For the sales rep and the sales manager to be able to have that conversation ahead of time. Okay, Rich, I'm going to demonstrate. So, witness, be listening, watching, look at my body language, look at what I'm saying, just fully be a witness in the situation versus, okay, Rich, I am now going to observe. I'm not going to say a word. Don't look at me. I'm going to be watching you exclusively throughout this whole process. To your point, I think they go in as a team and think that they're actually training by participating with. It's a big mistake, not just in sales process, in anything, to be able to demonstrate properly. But I do love, from a Jeremy's perspective, he knows his niche, right? His niche is less than 30 employees. You got a solo entrepreneur or an entrepreneur with less than 30 employees who is just trying to figure out this sales thing, and they don't realize the importance of the proper processes and the proper systems. And although it may seem very dry, as he says, it's so critical to bring people in to execute the sales process, not try and create it for their new business. So I can see that being a huge value add that he brings to businesses.
Oh, and was he firm on the final question that I asked him? I mean, you could almost, for our listeners who are not on YouTube right now, you could see the intensity on how he has seen so many sales reps get burnt when they get hired to come in to figure out the sales process that's broken. And that's not actually the proper use of a salesperson. The proper use of a salesperson is, we have the widget and we have the process. We just need to add more gas on the fire. And I think that's incredibly accurate.
Yeah, almost to the point, Rich, where it almost seems like he's on a mission to help protect sales reps against bad entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Because they're not bad entrepreneurs in terms of bad people, just entrepreneurs that really haven't quite figured out how to bring on successfully a sales team.